Hi everyone, I hope you're doing well. Today we have a new drawing tutorial where we'll draw 10 flowers from really easy minimal doodles to gradually more intricate and difficult ones. All I'm using in this video are these two Pigma Micron pens, and we are mainly using the 005 size, but I am going to use the 01 in the later flowers. I have sketched some of these flowers with a pencil, and in general, if you feel anxious about going in straight with a black pen, you absolutely don't need to do that. So spend as much time as you need with a pencil sketch and then darken the final outlines. But without further introductions, let's get started with the first flower, which is the lily of the valley. I'm first going to show you very quickly how to draw the flower part itself. So I wanted to keep this one very simple. All you need is this bell shape, and I'm going to show you two different ways to draw the small spikes at the bottom edge. The first one is the very simple version, which only has these 3 spikes, one in the middle and 2 on the sides. And in the second one, you can see that I drew a few extra ones in between. But then let's get started with the flower doodle itself. So first we are drawing this curved line for the stem, and then we're gonna draw these smaller little curves starting from the bigger one. Then we'll draw the bell flower shapes hanging from these small lines. I'm trying to go through things very slowly in this video, especially with these first few flowers, and you don't need to worry about every single line being perfect here. Small imperfections will blend in with the rest, and my flowers are also far from perfect. Then I'm quickly gonna finish the first flower by drawing these 2 big leaves, and you can also draw some extra thin lines to them if you feel like it. So when you're happy with the first flower, let's move on to the second one. The second flower is a forget-me-not, and I feel like this is a very standard 5-petal flower shape that many of us draw naturally when we are drawing flowers. So again, I'm first going to show you how to draw the individual flower in a little bit larger size so you can see all the little details. Forget-me-not flowers have these small spiky shapes between the petals, so that's why I drew these long oval shapes here, and after that we can just connect those shapes by drawing the petals in between. You can keep the petals more pointy or more rounded. I feel like both would work perfectly fine. And then let's draw a simple flower doodle using a similar shape to this one. However, these are so small that we are just keeping the shapes at the bare minimum. So I'm starting by always drawing a small circle and then drawing the 5 petals around it. Something I feel like suits flower drawings is empty space. So you don't necessarily need to connect every single line. Having some space here and there actually creates an almost more delicate look to many flowers, and we're gonna use the same technique later as well. So I just want you to kind of keep that in mind. I added a few flowers in the side profile and small leaves here and there, and after that we're done with this extremely simple flower doodle. But now let's keep going. So now we're gonna move on to the third one, which is gonna be a daisy flower. Again, a very simple doodle to add to your arsenal. So here we're starting from the middle circle again, and then we're gonna create these longer petals which are more rounded than pointy at the end. I feel like with daisies, the key is to add a slight variation to the petals. So maybe you can draw some of them to overlap slightly and maybe leave a bigger gap between some of them. Personally, I feel like that makes the flower a little bit more natural looking. Then I connected these first two flowers with a stem and added a very simple leaf here. And then I wanted to show you another daisy which has more of a downward droopy shape. So with this one, we aren't gonna draw any petals above the middle circle. I also made it slightly taller compared to the first one. And then I'm just drawing similar petals but focusing on these downward angles. Again, I made some of them overlap slightly, and then I thought we could combine this one with a downward drooping leaf as well. So that's it for our third flower, and now let's move on to the fourth one. And this one I believe is called Baby's Breath. I feel like we're slowly starting to increase the difficulty here. So with this one, we're gonna start from this very spiky branch. And I'm trying to keep these lines very sharp and angular. You don't need to follow the exact shape as I'm doing here, by the way. But after the main branch, let's get really close here so that you can see these tiny little round scribbles that we'll start drawing towards all the outer points of the branches. There is no right or wrong way to draw these shapes. Any scribbles will do. And I'm almost drawing them in these groups. You can then add a few extra lines to connect the flowers to the main branch, but again, you don't need to connect every single dot, so leaving some empty space here is completely okay. And after drawing some of these bigger scribbles, I also added a few extra black dots here and there just to fill up some of the empty spots even further. And then I finished this drawing with this little bow at the bottom of the branch. We are now at flower number 5, and this one is a sunflower. So here we're gonna start by drawing this bigger circle and a smaller circle inside of it. Next, we'll begin to draw these pointed petal shapes, and we're gonna go around the whole flower by leaving a small gap between these petals. So these will be the ones that are kind of the top layer, and on the next round we're gonna fill those empty gaps with similar shapes which are kind of peeking under the first petals. This is also the first flower where we're gonna start shading. So I just colored in the whole middle circle basically. We're trying to keep the inner circle a little bit darker than the outer one. and we are also trying to darken the edge of the outer circle a little bit more than the space between these circles. It doesn't matter how you color this part, I just made these round circle shapes, but any coloring method will definitely work. I also took the same pen and went over some of the outlines in these petals, so I especially darkened the outlines of the petals on the top layer, so it almost looks like there's a little bit of shadow that these cast on the lower level petals. I also drew a few extra lines to some of these, and then we can finish the sunflower by drawing these two leaves and the flower stem. If you're ready to increase the difficulty a little bit more, let's move on to the sixth flower, which is the anemone, or this could maybe even work as a poppy flower. I wanted to give you two different options here, and we're gonna start from the easier one, which is the side profile of this flower. So I started by drawing these almost triangular shapes by first drawing the center one and then adding these two slimmer shapes kind of peeking from behind it. You can also add some thin lines again. I feel like poppies and anemones almost have this wrinkly look, so drawing a lot of these thin lines can help to identify the flower. Then we'll draw a stem and these two leaves. Anemones have these very spiky leaf shapes, so I tried to copy that as well as possible, but I think you could get away with another leaf shape as well if you're not the biggest fan of these spiky ones. Then let's draw the same flower from the front profile. So this time I'm gonna start by drawing a black circle and then drawing these three rounded petals around it. And again, we're gonna use these empty gaps to draw the rest of the three petals that are under these three first ones. Of course, you don't need to draw them like this. I think it can just make it a little bit easier to get the petals as evenly sized as possible. If you want, you can also add some folds or details to these petals. And again, I'm also drawing a bunch of these wrinkle lines starting from the middle. Then what really brings all of this together is adding this second layer around the black center part, where we first draw some straight black lines and then draw these small black circles as almost a ring around the bigger circle. Personally, I think this makes all the difference and is a very recognizable feature of this flower. So that is it for the 6 easier flowers in this video, and now we'll crank up the difficulty while moving to the second page here. I'm gonna draw the rest of the flowers in a bigger size so that we can really see what's going on here and that we can focus on the individual lines a little bit better. So the 7th flower is a tulip, and I'm gonna give you 2 different options here again. The first one is a very standard tulip shape in my opinion, so we're starting by drawing this oval shaped petal with a slightly pointy tip. And again, I'm not necessarily connecting every single line here, and I'm also leaving these kind of small imperfections to the edges, which is a little bit difficult to explain, but I hope you'll see what I mean from the video. Then I'll go around this first oval and draw the rest of the tulip petals, which are all kind of leaning towards the center of the flower. After this, I drew a few shadowing lines again, and I feel like what is essential for tulips is drawing this center line at the back of each of the petals. There seems to be almost this spine at the center of the petals, and you can also add some very light shadowing towards the bottom of the flower and along the fold areas. We're also going to connect this to a stem, and then I drew a long leaf shape and again added a few thin lines to it. Then this is the first flower where I'm actually going to take the thicker pen and redraw some of the main petal outlines. This is not necessary, but it just adds a little bit of intensity and variation to some of these lines, and it's going to make the thin shadowy lines appear lighter compared to the actual outlines. But then I wanted to draw another tulip where the flower is just slightly more open. So we're gonna start the same way with this first central petal, and I'm gonna keep the top edges a little bit scribbly again, so the lines here are not entirely straight. I'm also gonna angle the left petal leaning away from the flower slightly, which gives it a little bit more airy and relaxed look compared to the first one. Otherwise, we're going to follow all the same steps as we did with the first flower. But that's that for the tulips, and now let's increase the difficulty a little bit more again, and next we're gonna draw a lily flower. The pencil sketches here are getting increasingly more important as well, so I think this is definitely a point for me where I wouldn't even attempt to draw these flowers without a sketch. I wanted this one to have two flowers. The first one is more of a standard shape and the other one opens slightly more to the side. And again, we are starting with these 3 petals that are almost the top layer. Lily has these quite long, almost spiky petals, and they also droop a little bit downwards when the flower is completely open. So I tried to draw the edge spikes slightly downward and again somehow fit the missing 3 petals in these gaps in the middle. I didn't follow this technique completely with the second flower because sometimes you want the petals to overlap differently. If you're having trouble with the shapes and directions of the petals overall, I highly encourage you to look through pictures of real lilies or even other lily drawings to help you get a balanced overall look. We are then drawing these long spiky things in the middle and some black circles as well. I think this is what really makes these look like lilies, and we can't forget some inner shadowing lines as well. I'm also drawing the stem and these longer, almost flimsy looking leaves, and after that I'm adding some extra lines with the thicker pen again to add intensity and shadows here and there. I think the shadowing part really elevates these flowers compared to the first ones, though I think both styles definitely have a time and place. But when you feel like you're ready to take your doodles to the next level, I believe starting by adding these scribbly lines and shadows, even to simple shapes, can be a good starting point. But now the lily is done and we have only 2 flowers left. So let's move on to the 9th flower, which is a cherry blossom branch. I don't think that cherry blossom flower itself is that difficult to draw. I'd say that the shape is somewhere between the forget-me-not flower and the lily flower, where it has those longer spiky things in the middle, but the petals overall have a rounded, shorter shape. But I think the difficult point of cherry blossoms is drawing the rest of the branch, because cherry blossoms often come in groups, and that is obviously a whole another challenge. So again, I have sketched this beforehand, and I started by drawing the first flower, and then we'll start to build the branch and other details around it. I chose to draw some flower buds here, some small leaves and other tiny thingies sticking out from the main branch, which just adds a little bit of visual interest. I kept the branch part quite dark by adding a lot of shadowing to it, and I think it just helps to differentiate it from the other shapes, and again just adds a little bit of contrast. Also, when there is more than one flower, you will need to keep in mind in which order to draw them to not have any extra black lines where they shouldn't be. So again, I highly encourage figuring out stuff like this by drawing a pencil sketch first, so it will be much easier to just follow along and draw the flowers in the correct order and in the correct place. There are obviously so many ways to draw cherry blossoms and all the other flowers in this video. All of them could also be drawn in an easier or more minimal way, and the flowers we started with, of course, can also be drawn in much more detail. So I'm just trying to offer you guys some variation in this style and difficulty so that everyone can hopefully find something that matches their level from this video. But after you're happy with your cherry blossoms, now it's finally time to move on to the 10th flower, which is the final boss of this video, and this is a peony flower. We're using the whole page for it and spending a good amount of time with this so that you can see what's going on every step on the way. I think peony is one of the most difficult flowers to draw because it has so many layers and details. This time I wanted to take you along to this sketching phase as well, because I think it will help you to get started. I don't think I could ever draw a peony without the sketch underneath, and I don't think there's any need to be able to do that either. I also think that it's perfectly fine to find some reference photos, because again, this is a complicated flower, and why would you ever need to be able to draw this out of memory? So I'm starting by almost drawing this circle here, and then these wave shapes outside of the circle, which kind of resemble the outermost petals of the flower. We can change all of this later, but I feel like this just gives a good starting point to the overall shape. And then I'm also marking this half circle, which is ever so slightly under the exact middle point of our circle here, and this will mark the darkest inner part. But that is all the guidelines I'm gonna draw here, so after this I'm just jumping straight to the petals. I usually start from the middle with the smaller petals and then begin to work around and figure out the ones close to the center petals. With this peony, I wanted the petals to look a little bit round and fold to the inside a little bit. So from all directions, we're going to create a fold, especially to these inner petals. And I'm also trying to add some unevenness to the outer edges again to make these a little bit more intricate and maybe closer to real flowers. However, if you want to keep things easier, you can always go for more simple shapes with rounded lines and fewer breaks and frilliness, and I think that would be a great way to get started. Peony is also one of those flowers that has many different types within the flower. Some have way smaller overlapping petals and some are way more simple and rounded. So again, you can always make decisions that you feel fits your needs and what you're comfortable with. This also starts to be a level where it's a little bit difficult to exactly explain what I'm doing here because there is no exact guide or a simple way to break down a drawing like this, but I hope the video helps you to understand the steps at least a little bit better. I'm also erasing some of the lines I made here, so there is no need to be afraid of the eraser. It's your friend, and when you start to get more and more shapes on the page, you might feel like some of the first petals are not balanced well or just need to be adjusted in some way. But after the pencil sketch is done, we're gonna take out the black pens for the last time. And here I'm actually starting with the thicker pen. I feel like for a drawing in this size, the 005 is a little bit small and works better for the shadowing we will do later. So as you can probably guess, we're starting to go over the sketch lines, and I'm again leaving a lot of gaps and breaking the lines to add this frilly, more detailed appearance to the flower. Again, you don't have to do this. I didn't do this for the first many peonies I drew, but this happens to be a flower that I've drawn quite a few times over the years, so I like to try out different things. I also feel like there's not much more I can explain here for a while, so I'll let you listen to some nice relaxing music instead. Now we are switching to the thinner pen and I'm starting to draw a bunch of shadowing lines. Again, there's no right or wrong way to do this. I like to focus on the inner parts of the petals, but I add some lines to the outer edges too, kind of to connect and add shape and movement to the petals. I will also take out the thicker pen later and intensify some of the most shadowy parts even further, so that those clearly have a little bit more intensity compared to the other lines. I finished this drawing with a few leaves around the flower that add a more complete look to it. The leaves can be many different shapes as well, so here I just went with some pretty basic pointy leaves. But after that's done, we have successfully walked through all 10 flowers in this video. If you're still here, thank you. I hope you enjoyed watching, and please let me know if you liked this video style. I think 10 might have been a little bit too many for this video, so if I make something like this in the future, I might stick to somewhere between 5 to 7 flowers. If there are any specific ones you'd like to see in the future, please let me know that in the comments. But I think that's it for today. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you're having a lovely day or night wherever you are, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye bye!